Chief of Staff John Kelly is denying a report that he used the word idiot to describe the president. And now his office is pushing back on our reporting that Kelly used another unflattering word to describe his boss. CNN senior White House correspondent Pamela Brown joins us with details. So what are you learning, Pamela?
Well, Anderson, a senior administration official tells my colleague Jeremy Diamond that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly told senior national security officials last month that he believed the president was becoming, quote, unhinged, a sign viewed by the members in that meeting that Kelly has grown increasingly frustrated with President Trump in recent months. Now, the official said he made the comment in a, quote, moment of frustration, calling the president unhinged at a meeting with Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Joseph Dunford, and senior National Security Council officials. But Kelly's comment, Anderson, came as the officials deliberated on the future of the U.S. effort in Syria and following Trump's off-the-cuff comments saying that he was determined to get U.S. troops out of the country, Anderson.
And what's John Kelly saying in response?
Well, John Kelly released a statement earlier today in response to another story, an NBC report that he called the president an idiot in a recent meeting. John Kelly releasing this statement saying, "I spend more time with the president than anyone else, and we have an incredibly candid and strong relationship. He always knows where I stand, and he and I both know this story is total BS. I am committed to the president, his agenda, and our country. This is another pathetic attempt to smear people close to President Trump and distract from the administration's many successes." Also, Anderson, I spoke with John Kelly's deputy, Zachary Fuentes, in the White House tonight. He flatly denied that Kelly ever called the president unhinged, saying that Kelly has deep respect for the office of the presidency and for President Trump himself. Fuentes says that's not a word that Kelly would use, first of all, and that Kelly wouldn't tolerate that kind of criticizing of the President of the United States as someone who has served in the military as a Marine. But he did acknowledge, Anderson, that Kelly and the president do have disagreements from time to time, as any chief of staff and president would. He explained oftentimes their disagreements come out of mutual respect of challenging each other's opinions. But in the end, Kelly will carry out whatever decision the president makes. And he says that they should be able to have a candid conversation and be allowed to let their hair down behind closed doors, Anderson.
I understand the president is also tweeting his response.
That's right. No surprise here that the president took to Twitter in the wake of these reports. And here's what the president said. "The fake news is going crazy, making up false stories and using only unnamed sources who don't exist, in parentheses. They are totally unhinged, and the great success of this administration is making them do and say things that even they can't believe they are saying. Truly bad people." This is a consistent theme, as you know, Anderson, with the president calling the media fake news, saying that the sources don't exist, which is simply not true. But of course, you know, this is his chief of staff, and so it's no surprising that he would want to weigh in, especially when the news broke, that NBC report broke, when the president and John Kelly were in the Oval Office together. And at that point, John Kelly denied that he ever said anything like that about the president.
This is just another instance, though, of tension between Kelly and President Trump. What's the bigger picture here in terms of their relationship?
Well, big picture here in talking to several White House officials, Anderson, is that there has been some deterioration of their relationship and Kelly's standing in the West Wing. It's been publicly evident at times with what Kelly has said and done. As you'll remember, his remark on Fox News that Trump's views have evolved on immigration. You know, there was the off-the-record meetings, the fact that he was in the hot water over the Porter situation and then held those off-the-record meetings with reporters. Some of that actually leaked out. The elevation of Kudlow and Bolton and the fact that they have direct access to the president. And then, of course, as we reported last week, the president returning to use his personal cell phone in recent weeks as a way to potentially get around Kelly. But I will say there are others, and I spoke to Kelly's deputy about this as well, who sort of pushed back at that notion, saying that, look, these are two men who have a great relationship. They have mutual respect for each other. Yes, they disagree, but that doesn't mean that, you know, that the president wants Kelly out or that Kelly wants to leave. So it sort of depends on who you talk to in terms of understanding the dynamic between the two men, and Kelly standing in the West Wing, Anderson.
All right, Pamela Brown, thanks very much. Stay with us.
Yep.
I want to bring in our chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, and retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, who served with Kelly in Iraq. Gloria, I know you've been talking to sources as well. What's the latest you're hearing?
Yeah, I want to echo a little bit about what Pamela said, because The sources I talked to who are friends of the president say that he's been unhappy and complaining about Kelly privately for a number of reasons. One of them was that he was unhappy when he told members of Congress that the president, wasn't fully informed on this question of immigration. Also, he kind of rankled at the way that he felt that Kelly had botched the Rob Porter security clearance issue, and that he really didn't like the way that Kelly had isolated him from his friends. You know, he used to call his friends all the time. I'm told that now sometimes he retreats actually to the Situation Room to call his friends so he can have some privacy, even though as Pamela reports that he did get his cell phone back, but he had to retreat there to get some access to the people he's used to talking to every day.
Wait a minute. Sorry, I just want to make sure I heard you right.
Yes.
You're saying the President of the United States goes into the Situation Room to get away from the Chief of Staff and call his friends?
I am told by one friend of the president's that on more than one occasion he has been called by the president from the Situation Room. Yep.
Wow. General Herdling, I mean, you know General Kelly. Does any of this ring true to you, that he might be critical of the president in private, that he might be frustrated, even going so far as calling the president unhinged or an idiot?
Well, Chief of Staff Kelly, I won't call him general because he's out of that position now, has been brought up in a military organization where demeanor and professionalism and character are all very important to leadership because it helps establish trust. But the other thing that's important here, Anderson, is that personalities matter and context is important whenever you're talking about how you deal with other people and under what situations. When I was working with General Kelly in northern Iraq and he was in western Iraq, I always saw him to be professional. His demeanor was always calm. He was cool, collected under the stresses of combat. But I can imagine that the stressors of the White House are much greater than what any of us might have experienced in combat. So I'm sure there is some time for venting of anger, venting of frustrations. And sometimes when people are around you, maybe some of these sources that you're hearing from, when they hear that venting, they take it a lot more seriously. Or, on the other hand, there's somebody in the White House or many people in the White House that are out to get General Kelly. I don't know.
Pamela, I mean, the fact that the president took to Twitter tonight in fairly short order to push back on these reports, I mean, how rattled does he get by stories that the West Wing is hobbled by friction?
He does not like it, to say the least. In fact, officials I speak with say that oftentimes the president will be more focused on the negative publicity more than what the report is actually about. In other words, he doesn't like it when there are negative stories surrounding people close to him. He views it as a distraction, taken away from him and what he is working on. And I think you can see that reflected not only with the president taking to Twitter to push back on this, but also in the on-the-record statement from the Chief of Staff himself, which is pretty unusual. That's not something that you get every day from John Kelly, despite all of the numerous stories that are out there about John Kelly. Anderson.
Gloria, I mean, how much has Kelly's influence waned? You know, we've heard all those stories about the president kind of feeling more, capable to do stuff on his own, and the whole issue with the phone. I mean, if Kelly were to ever leave by choice or otherwise, is there any indication right now the president believes he even needs another chief of staff?
I think the president probably believes that he can run the White House by himself, the way he ran the Trump organization. However, there's no doubt that if Kelly were to leave, he would need another chief of staff. But that person would have to understand that this is a different Donald Trump they're dealing with. This is someone who now believes he's got it. He's figured out how to run the White House. He's bringing in people he's comfortable with. That's why, for example, he wanted his personal doctor to go run the VA, for example, and that he thinks he can do it alone. And he is the one, make no mistake about it, any new chief of staff would have to realize that he is the one who would be making all of the decisions and would be running the White House the way he wants to run the White House, with an open door policy, inviting people to come in and chat all the time. And so it would be a very, very different kind of chief of staff and a very different role from the one that we're used to seeing in any White House.
And can I just jump
Yeah.
in very quickly, Anderson, if that's okay? Because I do think it's important, you know, to get to Kelly's side on this. Now that even his office is coming forward and being on the record, they're claiming that, look, Kelly's influence isn't waning here. That essentially when Kelly came in, people would just walk into the Oval Office willy-nilly. Then Kelly put in order, and now people will still go directly to the president, but then back channel to Kelly to fill him in on what's going on. So while it may appear that his influence is diminishing, he's not in the Oval Office as much, it's more of the structure that Kelly has put into place there.
General Hurley,
know,
go ahead.
Yeah, you know what I'd say too, to add to that, and Pamela brings up a very good point. We're now in post first year of Mr. Trump. We are now getting into some pretty intense situations, more so than some of the things he experienced with the domestic issues. He's now involved in foreign affairs. There are multiple issues happening all around the world that he's having influence on or attempting to have influence. And after a year of experience, I think the president believes he can do these things. You know, Chief of Staff Kelly spent 40 years with intergovernmental affairs, multinational affairs, knowing the inner workings of government. I'm sure that he is extremely frustrated to see someone who perhaps doesn't have the experience doing some things based on gut feel that Chief Kelly knows are probably going to go south very quickly unless he intercedes in some of these things. So I'm sure that's contributing a lot to the frustrations as well.
I think the problem generally is the unpredictability of the president. You wake up in the morning, you see what he's tweeted. It may not be the thing that you talked about the night before. It may set the day in a totally different direction from the one you wanted or you had planned on. And the unpredictability of the president's views are also something that I think probably rankles anybody who tries to work with him on particular issues. And I'm sure Kelly is one of those people who has had that kind of a problem.
And as the Chief of Staff, too, I would suggest John Kelly's main purpose in life is to control an established process and make things go smoothly. He's working for a guy where he has no control. The processes are all askew and things never go smoothly. As Gloria just said, you wake up and it's always a new set of dynamics on a daily basis. That's got to drive a Chief of Staff who's trying to set an agenda crazy.
Yeah.